Well, good morning, everybody, and happy Tuesday. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful long weekend and are excited to get back to the story. Um, we're getting near the end now, so I'm excited too. This will be our last week for our drawing for a Harry Potter book. So if you want to be entered in this week's drawing, make sure you send your artwork into my email address, and we'll draw for your very own book at the end of the week. All right. Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow, Professor McGonagall finally said. I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured, no one can possibly steal it. It's too well protected. But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she said shortly. She bent down and gathered up the fallen books. I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine. But they didn't. It's tonight, said Harry, once he was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. Snape's going to go through the trapdoor tonight. He's found out everything he needs, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent that note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore turns up. But we can't, Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron wheeled around. Snape was standing there. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. They stared at him. You shouldn't be inside on a day like this, he said with an odd, twisted smile. We were, Harry began without any idea where he was going to say. You want to be more careful, said Snape. Hanging around like this, people will think you're up to something. And Gryffindor really can't afford to lose any more points, can it? Harry flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. Be warned, Potter. Any more nighttime wanderings, and I will personally make sure you're expelled. Good day to you. He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out on the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. Right. Here's what we've got to do, he whispered urgently. One of us has to keep an eye on the snake. Wait outside the snap room and follow him if he leaves. Hermione, you better do that. Why me? It's obvious, said Ron. You can pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know, he put on a high voice. Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I've got question 14B wrong. Oh, shut up, said Hermione, but she agreed to go and watch out for Snape. And we'd better stay outside on the third floor corridor, Harry said. Come on. But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments, she stormed. Enough of this nonsense. If I hear you come anywhere near here again, I'll take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house. Harry and Ron went back to the common room. Harry had just said, at least Hermione's on Snape's trail, when the portrait of the fat lady swung open and Hermione came in. I'm sorry, Harry, she wailed. Snape came out and asked me what I was doing. So I said I was waiting for Flitwick and Snape went to get him. And I only just got away. I don't know where Snape went. Well, that's it, isn't it? Harry said. The other two stared at him. He was pale and his eyes were glittering. I'm going out of here tonight, and I'm going to try and get to the stone first. You're mad, said Ron. You can't, said Hermione. After what McGonagall and Snape have said, you'll be expelled. So what? Harry shouted. Don't you understand? If Snape gets a hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was going to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to be expelled from. He'll flatten it, or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore, can't you see? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the house cup? If I get caught before I can get to the stone well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have, because I'm never going over to the dark side. I'm going through the trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two say is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember? He glared at them. You're right, Harry, said Hermione in a small voice. I'll use the invisibility cloak, said Harry. It's just lucky I got it back. But will it cover all three of us, said Ron. All three of us? Oh, come off it. You don't think we'd let you go alone? Of course not, said Hermione briskly. How do you think you'd get through the stone without us? I'd better go and look through my books. There might be something useful. But if we get caught, you two will be expelled too. Not if I can help it, said Hermione grimly. Flitwick told me a secret that I got 112% on his exam. They're not throwing me out after that. After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of Gryffindor's had anything to say to Harry any more, after all. This was the first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione was skimming through all of her notes. hoping to come across one of the enchantments they were about to try to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk much. Both of them were thinking about what they were about to do. Slowly the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. "Better get the cloaks," Ron muttered as Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs to their dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed a use on Fluffy. He didn't feel much like singing. He ran back down to the common room. "We'd better put the cloak on here and make sure it covers all three of us. If Filch spots one of our feet wandering along on its own—" "What are you doing?" a voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who looked as though he'd been making another bid for freedom. "Nothing, Neville, nothing," said Harry hurriedly putting the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. "You're going out again," he said. "No, no, no," said Hermione. "No, we're not. Why don't you go to bed, Neville?" Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might even now be playing Fluffy to sleep. "You can't go out," said Neville. "You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble." "You don't understand," said Harry. "This is important." But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. "I won't let you do it," he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you." "Neville," Ron exploded, "get away from the hole and don't be an idiot." "Don't you call me an idiot," said Neville. "I don't think you should be breaking any more rules, and you were the one who told me to stand up to people." "Yes, but not us," said Ron in exasperation. "Neville, you don't know what you're doing." He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. "Get on, then. Try and hit me," said Neville, raising his fist. "I'm ready." Harry turned to Hermione. "Do something," he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. "Neville," she said, "I'm really sorry about this." She raised her wand. "Petrificus Totalis," she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. His legs sprang together, his whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran over to him. Neville's jaws were jammed together so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. "What have you done to him?" Harry whispered. "It's the full body bind," said Hermione miserably. "Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry." "We had to, Neville. No time to explain," said Harry. "You'll understand later, Neville," said Ron as they stepped over him and pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. And in the front of the store, in the front of the, at the foot of the first set of the stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. "Oh, let's kick her just this once," Ron whispered in Harry's ear, but Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase to the third floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. "Who's there?" he said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. "Know you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you a ghoulie or ghosty or wee student beastie?" He rose up into the air and floated there, squinting at them. "Should call Filch, I should, if something's a-creeping around unseen." Harry had a sudden idea. "Beeves," he said in a hoarse whisper. "The Bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible." Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. "So sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir," he said greasily. My mistake, I didn't see you. Of course I didn't. You're invisible. Forgive old Peevesy and his little joke, sir." "I have business here, Peeves," croaked Harry. "Stay away from this place tonight." "I will, sir. I most certainly will," said Peeves, rising up in the air again. "Hope your business goes well, Baron. I shall not bother you." And he scooted off. "Brilliant, Harry," whispered Ron. A few seconds later they were there, outside the third-floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. "Well, there you are," Harry said quietly. "Snape's already gotten past Fluffy." Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon them what was facing them. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other two. "If you want to go back, I won't blame you," he said. "You can take the cloak. I won't need it now." "Don't be stupid," said Ron. "We're coming," said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. As the doors creaked, low rumbling growls met their ears. All three of the dog's noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. "What's that at its feet?" Hermione whispered. "Looks like a harp," said Ron. "Snape must have left it there." "It must wake up the moment that you stop playing," said Harry. Well, here goes. He put Hagrid's flute on its lips and blew it. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew breath. Slowly the dog's growls ceased. It tottered on its paws and fell onto its knees. Then it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. "Keep playing," Ron warned Harry, as they slipped out of the cloak and crept toward the trap door. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. "I think we'll be back to pull the door open," said Ron. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," said Ron, peering over the dog's back. "Want to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "All right." Ron gritted his teeth and stepped carefully over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the ring of the trap door, which swung open. "What can you see?" Hermione said anxiously. "Nothing, just black. There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop." Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. "You want to go first, are you sure?" said Ron. "I don't know how deep this thing goes. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep." Harry handed the flute over, and in a few seconds silent, the dog growled and twitched, but the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into its deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trap door. There was no sign of the bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by its fingertips, then looked up at Ron and said, "If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the Owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right?" "Right," said Ron. "See you in a minute, I hope." And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell down, 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 and flump! With a funny, muffled sort of thump, he landed on something soft. He sat up and fell around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. "It's okay," he called up to the light of the passage, the size of the postage stamp, which was now the open trap door. "It's a soft landing. You can jump." Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled next to Harry. "What's this stuff?" were his first words. "Dunno, some sort of plant thing. I suppose it's here to break the fall. Come on, Hermione." The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. "We must be miles into the school," she said. "Luckily this plant thing's here, really," said Ron. "Lucky!" shrieked Hermione. "Look at you both!" She leapt up and struggled towards the damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. "Stop moving," Hermione ordered them. "I know what this is. It's Devil's Snare." "Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help," snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. "Shut up. I'm trying to remember how to kill it," said Hermione. "Well, hurry up. I can't breathe," Harry gasped, wrestling with it. It's curled around its chest. "Devil's Snare, Devil's Snare. What did Professor Sprout say?" "It likes the dark and damp. So light a fire," Harry choked. "Yes, of course, but there's no wood," Hermione cried, wringing her hands. "Have you gone mad?" Ron bellowed. "Are you a witch or not?" "Oh, right," said Hermione, and she whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flames she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds the two boys felt it loosening its grip, cringed away from the light and the warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were able to pull free. "Lucky you pay attention to herbology," Harry said as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. "Yeah," said Ron, "and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in his crisis. There's no wood, honestly." "This way," said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the only way forward. All they could hear, apart from the footsteps, was the gentle drip of water trickling down the walls. The passageway slowly sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt of the heart, he remembered the dragon said to be guarding vaults in the Wizard's Bank. If they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, Norbert had been bad enough. "Can you hear something?" Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling and clinking sound seemed to be coming from up ahead. "Do you think it's a ghost?" "I don't know. Sounds like wings to me." "There's light ahead. I can see something moving." They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceiling arching high above them. It was full of small jewel-bright birds, fluttering and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. "Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room?" "Probably," said Harry. "They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if they all swoop down at once, well, there's no other choice. I'll run." He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him in any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but he was locked. The other two followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even when Hermione tried her Alamora charm. "Now what?" said Ron. "These birds, they can't be here just for decoration," said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering. Glittering? "They're not birds," Harry said suddenly. "They're keys, winged keys. Look carefully. That must mean—" He looked around the chamber while the other two squinted up at the flock of keys. "Yes, look, broomsticks. We've got to catch the keys to the door." "But there are hundreds of them." Ron examined the lock on the door. "We're looking for a big old-fashioned one, probably silver like the handle." They each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring into the midst of the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched keys darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch one. Not for nothing, though, was Harry the youngest Seeker in a century. He had a knack for spotting things other people didn't. After a minute's weaving about through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that had a bent wing, as if it had already been caught and stuffed roughly into the keyhole. "That one," he called to the others. "That big one there. No, there, with bright blue wings, the feathers all crumpled on one side." Ron went speeding in that direction Harry was pointing, crashed into the ceiling, and nearly fell off his broom. "You've got to close in on it," Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. "Ron, you come up at it from above. Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down, and I'll try to catch it. Right now!" Ron dived, Hermione rocketed upward, and the key dodged them both. Harry streaked after it and sped toward the wall. Harry leaned forward and with a nasty crunching noise, pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chamber. They landed quickly. Harry ran to the door, the key struggling in his hand. He rammed it through the lock and turned. It worked. The moment he had clicked it open, the key took flight again, looking very battered now that it had been caught twice. "Ready?" Harry asked the other two, his hand on the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all, but as they stepped into it, light suddenly flooded around the room to reveal an astonishing sight. They were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard, behind the black chessmen, which were all taller than they were, and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. "Now what do we do?" Harry whimpered. "It's obvious, isn't it?" said Ron. "We've got to play our way across the room." Behind the white pieces, they could see another door. "How?" said Hermione nervously. "I think," said Ron, "we're going to have to be chessmen." He walked up to a black knight and put his hand out to touch the knight's horse. At once the stone sprang to life. The horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmeted head to look down at Ron. "Do we have to join you to get across?" The Black Knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. "This needs thinking about," he said. "I suppose we've got to take the place of the three of the black pieces." Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally he said, "Now don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are all that good at chess." "We're not offended," said Harry quickly. "Just tell us what to do." "Well, Harry, you take the place of that bishop, and Hermione, you go next to him instead of that castle. What about you?" "I'm going to be a knight," said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because at these words a knight and a bishop and a castle turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Ron, Harry, and Hermione took. "White always plays first in chess," said Ron, peering across the board. "Yes, look." A white pawn had moved forward 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? "Harry, move diagonally 4 squares to the right." The first real shock came when one of the other knights was taken. The white queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board while he lay quite still, face down. "Had to let that happen," said Ron, looking shaken. "Leaves you free to take that bishop. Hermione, go on." Every time one of their men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there was a huddle of limp black players slumped along the wall. Twice Ron only just noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as they had lost black ones. "We're nearly there," he muttered suddenly. Let me think. Let me think." The White Queen turned her blank face toward him. "Yes," he said softly, "it's the only way. I've got to be taken." "No!" Harry and Hermione shouted. That's chess, snapped Ron. You've got to make some sacrifices. I'll take one step forward and she'll take me. That leaves you to free to checkmate the king, Harry. But do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron, look, if you don't hurry up, he'll already have the stone. There was no alternative. Ready? Ron called, his face pale but determined. Here I go. Now don't hang around once you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. All right, we're going to stop there today. Hope you have a fantastic day. And don't forget to send your artwork in to my email address. Thanks again, everybody.